Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Budget Task Force meeting of July 19th. Welcome all. This week, we're just having one group meeting instead of having the subgroups meeting. And we'll focus on a couple of things. We'll get updates from each group. We will look at sort of walk through maybe slide by slide what we're thinking about for the public forum that's coming up on Monday, which we invite you all to. Kristen, you might be able to help me remember the time that we're starting.
7 o'clock
7 o'clock at the fire station.
at Millennium School.
At Millennium. Okay, good. 7 o'clock at Millennium. And it'll be virtual as well. So looking forward to welcoming all that can join. We'll go through the walkthrough, but maybe just for any members of the public that are watching, we are really looking for input on the agenda and outline itself of the report. The charge of this group is to prepare a report for the various town committees, the finance committee, the select board, and the school committee. And we're looking for your input on what questions you would hope to be answered by this report, things that are on your mind, analysis that you'd like to see, and we'll share what our working thoughts are and look forward to getting any ideas and questions that you might have. We'll talk about the departmental and municipal interviews. I'm also hoping that today we might be ready to talk about when we might have a first cut of a working paper draft. Like, at what point can we begin to integrate all these pieces into a document and look at the gaps and sort of see where we are with it. So let's come to that towards the end. I know that the benchmarking subcommittee approved their minutes on Monday from the 12th. And Jeremy, do we have minutes from the full group meeting for the 12th?
I'm still working on those. We've been a little crazy with year end in our office, so I haven't had a chance to finish those.
No problem at all. We'll push those to next time. Okay, why don't we start off with the benchmarking efficiency work group update?
Do you guys
Christina,
want me
do you
to
wanna-
take
go.
that? Sure. So what we finished up on Monday was we went through the spreadsheet that I compiled of all the sort of detailed breakdowns of the market basket communities. There are different departments, so we could do an apples to apples or as close to apples comparison as we could with Westford. And we decided to go out to the department heads and ask them to help us kind of dive a little deeper as to why there might be spending differences in each department. Excuse me. So I just sent those emails off with all of those questions this morning. And the idea is we'll give them, a week or so to get back to us, and then we'll set up meetings with them to discuss and go over what the findings are and what the differences are, so that we can kind of figure out maybe what some of our recommendations might be. After that, we'll go out to other towns. Right now, it seems like we're sort of narrowing in on Acton, Chelmsford, Reading, and Westboro. Does that sound right? Efficiency team. There may be others as we go through, but those 4 seemed like the ones that we thought we could learn the most from, and that would be applicable to Westford, given relative size, relative per capita income, things like that. I think if I've missed anything, let me know.
That sounds great, and really the heart of the work from the efficiency point of view. From the benchmarking point of view, if we were going to target getting to a working draft, I don't know, by the end of August or something, given that people might be on vacations, do you feel like that first benchmarking piece is approaching a form that we could put it all together and do a working draft?
I think the data is probably there. I am horrible at Excel and creating graphs and charts. I know you can do it from the spreadsheet that's there, but I am not that person. So if somebody else can figure out how to put that in a graphical, manner for different areas, different whatever, I certainly have ideas of how I think we should display stuff, but I can't do that. So yes, we can get there as long as somebody else steps up and does the behind the scenes technical Excel magic.
I can help with Excel, Christina.
Okay, great. I know we had Vibu doing that Tableau he was having some issues, and I haven't been able to connect with him, so I don't know. He may be able to get into that Tableau software, and we could use that as well, so it's consistent with the schools, which would be nice.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit to the school data because they're kind of separate. So Christina has been taking the lead on the town data. So the school
Thanks,
data,
Valerie, I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
that's okay. I just want everybody to know they're kind of at different spots. Because you kind of jumped right in and did your own data collection, and we were waiting for the schools. It made sense to kind of use the DESI per pupil spending, and Vibu put it into a visualization program so that it clusters them based on sort of quartiles, so that you can quickly see where Westford falls for each one of these categories. And it also breaks it down into subcategories under that. So I've spent the last 2 weeks or so looking at those to see where is Westford sort of fall in those quartiles, and what towns are spending less than us, and what kind of questions does that prompt? I mean, a sort of a general takeaway is that Westford spends low in a lot of these categories. So there may not be a ton of areas to investigate further, but there are questions that I'm highlighting as I go through it. I think that could be ready to maybe have a fresh set of eyes go through it with me and look at it, maybe like beginning to mid next week. And then we need to figure out sort of how to answer the questions that come out of that analysis. You know, I'm learning that schools, it's probably not a surprise, right? Like, I know Christina is seeing it on the town side, but districts set themselves up differently. So whereas we might spend more on curriculum coordinators, another district spends on instructional coaches. So, you know, when you see something in one category, it could be offset in another category. And then like another example for differences is capital expenditures. Whereas we use sort of our free cash and capital planning process for Chromebooks and student and staff devices. Some of these districts, I think, I can see a huge spending in that category. So I assume that they're putting their Chromebooks into their operating budgets. So all that to say that I think the data side is just taking a little bit longer, because you kind of stare at it and then you need like a concentrated amount of time to kind of like look at it, make some conclusions, and sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it's getting there. I guess.
Okay, well, that's great. I should have for this time, and maybe for next time, I'll pull up the Gantt chart, kind of just tracking to where we are. If we're looking for I think end of August, we sort of need actually a pretty good working draft that's in the kind of finalization, editing, here's the things that are missing sort of mode. So I guess we can arc to that would be great. I think the protocol here is to share sort of PDF non-editable versions in the shared space. So as those things come together, maybe what I'll ask Dan to do early next week is take all the data that we have in our various subcommittee forms, put it into the agenda to create sort of what will become the master draft working document. And we can ask folks to make contributions, maybe not in the same document if we're using PDFs, but maybe we'll create a folder for that where different sections can be posted. If we did that, then that would give us roughly another month to complete some of the efficiency survey interview stuff, kind of get to what we think is a good final version to present to the various boards. So, okay, great. Yep.
I wonder about the PDF, just because if we just have some discipline and make sure we don't email out our comments, if people are actually trying to make changes, having Word or Excel or PowerPoint or whatever might be easier for folks to make their suggestions in than PDF. The thought.
Yeah, I agree the PDF is really cumbersome. So I wonder if maybe we can talk about that, Kristen, see if we can just make a set of rules or maybe a set of editing privileges or something that in a Google Doc if that's how we're doing it, so that we don't run into, crosstalk. But it is hard to keep track of if it's a whole bunch of PDFs. So for next time, why don't we'll take on the action item of a protocol and a method for probably in Dan's shared drive, having a working document that we can access and review. And a bunch of the stuff should be ready to be placed in there. So let me just make sure we've heard everything from the benchmarking group. So we've heard from the municipal data, the schools data, and the sort of interview work that's going to go on in terms of efficiency searching, both internally in departments and then with the targeted towns that we've got. Does that more or less cover the update from that group?
Yeah, I think that does.
I think it covers, like what is happening in action. But our most recent subcommittee, I think we were talking to about there could be other efficiencies that need to be sort of researched that might not come out of, like, there's this data analysis track, right, that will illuminate some possibilities, but there might be other efficiencies that just need to be like regionalization or shared resourcing that wouldn't maybe come out of, hey, who's spending less than us? And I don't know if that's ongoing yet.
I think that also something I've talked about with Dan is it may be helpful for the public to do a little bit of a look back on the efficiency side, because the town has taken a couple sort of shared resources, efficiency gains, combining the Department of Public Works. There have been a couple things that may suggest other things that the town has done recently, that not real recently, over the past 5 years, say. So it may be good to have a little intro that says, here's recent successes in efficiency gain. Here's what they looked like. And then to your point, Valerie, it may suggest some other categories that we need to come back to and find a way to look at.
I just don't want to lose track of it because it's part of our subcommittee title, but sort of the benchmarking chunk is taking so much time that I don't want to get to the end and realize, oh, we forgot to sort of zoom out and see what else could be out there.
Not only that, I'll just kind of jump on some of the efficiencies that we're seeing, or at least that we're seeing other towns do. It may not be a quick fix, or it may not be a quick thing. The regionalization was one example that's probably at the higher end, but there are some other things that could be a lot more complicated to implement than we think. And right now, we just haven't gotten to the point of really diving in and sort of dissecting what would that really look like and what would we need to do to get to that efficiency. It's not, oh, buy this paper that's 2 cents cheaper or something quick like that. It's much more complicated.
I recall that earlier on, there was a similar task force that was looking at efficiencies. I forget the name of the task force. It was, I don't know, a decade or two ago.
Yeah.
As part of that, they were looking a lot, just playing off of Valerie's point, they were looking a lot at things that might be consolidated between school and town. It was HR and procurement and groundskeeping and that sort of thing. So I think it's a good idea that Valerie has, that maybe to get started on that sooner than later if we're trying to have things done in August, right? Especially if we want to be able to talk about it with townspeople at the early September strategic retreat. So I'm seconding that, and I'm just wondering if there's an action that we should have coming out of this meeting that starts the ball rolling.
So our team does have a very rudimentary just punch list of efficiencies. So we can certainly expand on those in our subcommittee work over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, maybe add
But
regionalization. Go ahead.
We do have shared services as a punch list item. If any of you as larger committee members want to provide us with feedback, I'll send out the list of efficiencies to everyone of what we have so far. And if you have anything to add or any comments to make on what we have, that would be really helpful.
So if I could just add on to that, sorry, Tom,
Yeah, go ahead.
Erica, Valerie and I recently found that old report. It was from like 2004, and I don't know how much she's looked through it, but I sort of looked through it last night, and yeah, they did a lot of work, and they spent like 2 years digging into various efficiencies, I'll just say. That's sort of where I got the it just sort of solidified my thinking that some of these efficiencies are going to take a little bit more than just a quick, oh, that sounds like a great idea, let's just go do it. So I don't know if we want to look back at that report to see what they came up with in 2004 and see what's applicable still that maybe did not get implemented. Maybe things have changed and it's doable now.
Is that something that can be shared in the shared area? Maybe we could all.
I could send a link. It's on the town's website.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could send a link around, and let's agree that for the, I guess, the subcommittee, your subcommittee, Christina, Valerie, Kristen, add items that look at regionalization and then sort of shared resources within the town. Some of the things that were suggested in that report, I haven't looked at in a while, but some of the things that were suggested have been done since, like the shared facilities department, like the kind of consolidation of Department of Public Works from the Highway Department, and all the other independent groups that are now merged. But I'm sure there's some good ideas there that remain that we could come back to and think about. Okay, well, this is a great discussion, and this is exactly the kind of thing that I think we'll have once we get this sort of draft document together. We can just add, when we're meeting together, we can just add, you know, hey, we should flesh this out. We should add this section. We should add this bullet. Okay, so maybe Kristen, so are you folks willing to take on that action item of, I guess, sharing the punch list and including things that came out of the past 2004 report that seem relevant, and making sure that regionalization and shared resources internally are covered in some form?
Yep, we can definitely do that. Christina can add what she maybe found that we didn't already add into our sheet, but it's pretty comprehensive, and we'll get that out before the end of the week if possible.
Okay, great. Valerie?
I was just gonna add to when you're thinking, talking about the outline, it has me thinking about some of the work or the sort of charts and stuff that don't necessarily fall into one of our subcommittees, and had to sort of also in parallel have somebody working on those things. Like I'm thinking is particularly like the Hingham document, I thought had a lot of valuable information about just Hingham, like over time, our population, how our chunks of population have changed. You know, one thing that we're seeing in the budget, the form, the input feedback form, was some questions about the previous override. So like how to sort of share some of that Westford specific data in upfront in that chunk of the report. And I want to not lose track of that when we're talking about these two subcommittees and the outputs of those, so that we don't lose that thread also.
Yeah, Dan
Yeah.
and I can certainly work on that for the town side if Jenny and Dr. Chu work on it for the school side. I think a lot of it's already in kind of the annual report that we put out every year. So we can use that as a template and then supplement with additional data.
Okay, thank you.
I think that'd be great. My read of the Hingham, so I was also looking at that and thinking, how much of this do we need? So just for discussion, and we don't have to decide today, I was thinking that our preamble section would probably be pretty pared down from that. That seemed like there was a lot there, a lot of basic research that people could do if they wanted to, but didn't seem to be immediately informing the budget decisions that we're talking about. But we definitely need something. I think if they've got 40 pages of intro, we probably need 10 pages of intro at least to kind of give the context of where we are and what the trends have been. But if you take another look at that, maybe just think about for next time whether we need all of that or whether we're going to get people to the right level of being able to look at these things and talk about them with us with maybe a little bit less. Okay, so far we've agreed on a couple things for the benchmarking efficiency group, and we'll get this working draft kickstarted for next week with sort of a protocol of how we'll edit and make sure we're observing open meeting law. Budget challenges and new revenue sources. So budget challenges, I think we're closing in on getting good dollarized ranges for each of the budget challenge items, like the special education funding and like the competitive pay and some of the other things. I'll touch base with Dan at the beginning of next week to see if we have all of that kind of converging into one place. On the new revenue sources, I think Shanna was largely done, although I've seen she has done some additional updating. I think I've gotten to the point where, except for a few things, which I need some input from some of the town departments, we can ballpark the ranges of what the new revenue opportunities might be, and just provide additional context on some of them. So in between last time and this time, I got some good numbers out of the Recycling Commission to be able to ballpark the benefits of composting, for example, and diverting waste stream and reducing our tipping fees. So that's like between $150,000 and $200,000 if fully implemented. To Christina's point, some of the things that are being identified would be gradual in the benefit showing up and would require a lot of community education, because obviously getting everybody in town to compost all their food waste is not something that we can budget, right? I mean, that's a great ambition to have, but it's not something that we can bank savings against in a specific way. Likewise, the move to the kind of new waste collection protocol that Westford will likely move to, which would give people a tote that would be collected automatically by the trash collector, and any overflow that wouldn't fit in their tote would have to go in a pay-as-you-throw bag that you'd have to buy. We can come up with some estimates, but it's a little bit unclear how people's behavior will change when they know that everything in the tote can be done for free. If that's the direction we choose and are managing their waste different, that would be a positive effect. It would reduce our tipping charges. It would be better for the environment, but a little bit hard to know exactly how much benefit that would produce in terms of revenue for the bags. I did more investigation into the basically the tax that many municipalities are thinking about, which is a real estate transfer tax. So when you sold a house, some combination of the buyer and seller would pay a percentage that would go into, in all the cases that have been pursued so far in the Commonwealth, it goes into a land trust or an affordable housing trust. So the main finding there is that there are 7 or 8 communities that have filed home rule petitions with the legislature to be able to do this. None of them have been taken up yet for debate. There is a Commonwealth-wide bill that's been put forward that would give all municipalities the ability to add something like this. In that case, though, the legislation is specific to affordable housing. So any proceeds from this kind of tax, should a community choose to implement it, would need to go into an affordable housing trust. So you wouldn't be able to use it for general budget offset. It would be specifically for that purpose if this particular bill goes through. So the main takeaway is that all the communities that proposed this so far, and this bill that's in the House, which has not yet been taken up, in all cases, the funding that would be generated goes toward affordable housing. So that might be a good thing for Westford to do for some other reason, but that's not going to be a budget offset item. At least there's no precedent for it in anything anyone's tried so far in the Commonwealth or that's in this bill. So in any case, what we'll do is we'll post this updated document that has, I think, pretty good ballparks for most of the new revenue sources. A few things left outstanding, but that's in a good place to put into this master document, and then sort of further explore, what's missing and what might be helpful for the public. I think so far it surfaced a lot of really interesting things that we should definitely do. In terms of major new revenue sources, probably the most, there's the intriguing idea, which I think would be a massive community discussion around marijuana dispensary. I think we may have talked about that a little bit last time, but Shanna's work is include. Oops, I think Shanna, we're getting your dog, maybe. There you go. Basically identified that is something a lot of our neighbors have done. It's generated really substantial revenue. In most cases, the downsides that people were concerned about have not materialized in a significant way. So interesting thing to think about, and there's a real number attached to it in terms of size, million plus dollars. Many of the other ones though fall into the $150,000, $200,000 if fully implemented after a sustained public effort. So anyway, I'm encouraged by it because I think there are some really good things that we should definitely do. But in terms of major revenue opportunities, most of them are fairly small when we've looked at what they look like in terms of implementation, or we found that they're not really relevant. There's a number of NA not applicables that once we've looked into these potential sources. So good that we looked into it and understand them better, but in some cases they're not really. There's no general revenue raise capability in them. So anyway, it'll make more sense when you have a chance to look at it. So next week we'll have this draft stood up. You can go through it and give feedback on what you've seen so far. I guess other folks in our group, other things that we maybe want to touch base on.
I think just for the purpose of presenting it, Christina had messaged to Tom and I about some, I don't know, about anomalies or efficiencies or greater revenue sources on ambulance fees with other communities. So I spent some time this weekend researching that. So thanks, Christina, for passing over that lead. So I updated that document to include some of the research that I've so far compiled on that, which looks like there could be some situations in which our fees are lower. And so there may be an area of opportunity, but I think we're working still to connect with the chief of the fire department so I can get some more accurate current information. I'm not sure if what I was able to find online for Westford has been changed at all over the last few years. But there looks like with some communities, there's some significant differences. So there could be an area of at least medium opportunity potentially there that we need to look into further. But that's probably the only thing that we added to the revenue generation list since the last meeting.
I should mention on the revenue generation list, there's sort of a whole section that needs to be written on sort of the nature of override. What is an override? What's Westford's own history with overrides? What have other communities done in terms of overrides? So a bunch of data has been collected on that. I think it's something we can pull together pretty quickly, but that's a section that has not been sort of written and integrated in. But that's probably something I can get done in some reasonable form by this meeting next week. Sort of an explainer of what it is and sort of the history in other places of what has been done with overrides. Christina?
Yeah, where does an analysis of all of the various fees that Westford charges come into play? I know the finance committee had asked for like an analysis of all of the different fees that are charged across the board in Westford to make sure that they're comparable to other communities, that they're covering our costs where it makes sense, that kind of thing. I'm just not sure where that stands, sort of along the lines of the ambulance fee, but broader.
That's a great question. Two of them are covered in the document, and you raised a new category I hadn't really thought of yet, so we'll add that too. There's the fees that we charge businesses in terms of permitting, other fees like that. So I've asked Jeff Morissette to pull that together. That was done for the Economic Development Committee, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. So he is going to update that. There's the fees that the schools charge for various things, and the schools I know are working on that. So there is just the fees charged residents though. So dog license, I think they're by statute, but the town does collect property tax fee, property taxes. So there probably is something we should add about fees that are charged directly to the resident population, in addition to business and school related. So I'll add that.
Tom, do we have any data there on that we could track down? And this is a rhetorical question, you're not gonna know the answer offhand, but of situations where we've been waiving fees and what percentage of time we're doing that? Because maybe it's small dollars, but if we're doing fee waivers in a lot of situations, maybe we should be looking at that too.
Yeah, I know the schools do have policies on when they waive fees, so we can include that as well. I'm not aware of waiving any fees on the business side, but we'll check on it.
Sometimes the planning board might do it or zoning board might do it if, you know, the application doesn't get reviewed in full and it gets withdrawn, or if there's a hardship or something. So if you craft up an email, Shane, I can send it off to the applicable departments. I think I had sent off to all of the budget task force members the overall fee analysis that we had done for every department. If you don't have it, please let me know and I can get it to you. We just haven't done a comparison to our benchmark communities or other communities. I think that's what we're getting at now.
Yeah, Erica?
Just going back onto what you were saying about the difficulty in understanding how people's behaviors might change as a result of pay as you throw and the bags, et cetera. So I wonder if there might be already some good answers on that from the recycling committee, given that they've already been looking into this very heavily. We might just be able to tap them for that. I know that the discussions with the departments are coming up, and so I just thought this might be a good time to bring that up if we're talking to them.
We can also look at the history of our neighbors when they've adopted, what's happened afterwards too, so that there is some good data there, I think.
Yeah, we're clearly not the first to do this. I'm just thinking that they may have already looked at that rather than reinventing it. But yes, if they haven't done it, then yeah, that would certainly be in our basket to do it.
Yeah, Chris and I are in dialogue with Ken and Elizabeth from the Recycling Commission, so we'll add that to the discussion. I think that if we're looking at the revenue opportunity, well, we'll ask them this. My sense is that we did sort of a pro forma estimate based on current waste levels and the volume of the tote, and then how many bags an average family would generate. So I think the dollar number we came up with as an overall revenue we'd get from these collection bags is probably a cap, meaning they would probably be smaller than that in implementation, but because it would reflect if people use the same amount of waste now, but just in this new way of doing it, and people I think would naturally reduce some. That's what's happened elsewhere. But yeah, really good question. So we'll see if we can refine any expectation for what additional revenue or waste tippage savings would be based on either what they already know at the Recycling Commission or what other towns have done. Christina?
So I'll just add, because I've been involved with the Recycling Commission for like 13 years. Generally, when you go to some form of a pay-as-you-throw system, you're really getting a savings. It's not exactly a revenue generator from the bags. You're saving in your tipping fees because people are putting less out at the curb. They're composting, maybe they're buying less. They're shifting things to recycling. Hopefully it's the proper things, but they reduce what they're putting out at the curb, and that's where you get your savings. The bags, it's minimal, and it pretty much just covers the cost. I think people have seen, I want to say like a 20% savings in their tipping fees. It depends on how low you go as far as what you're allowing at the curb for free or for, under your taxes or not. So the lower you go, the bigger the savings is.
Good. Yeah, thanks, Christina. I saw Amy's hand for just a second. Do you have a question, Amy?
I don't know. I was just sort of thinking of who that impacts, and my question, I guess, would be the current. I think currently you can have 3 barrels. I kind of forget. If you went with something like that, how much would it be reduced as, or what they would be allowed? Would it be a considerable reduction of what people are allowed at this current moment? Do you know offhand?
It would be a considerable reduction, because right now people can have 3 barrels, and the bins that people are typically thinking about are 64 gallon,
So
which is it would be less.
yeah, 2/3. Okay. I just think about who this is going to impact. Probably larger families. Just thinking about. Okay.
Yeah, that is the discussion when you're having this pro con is are you creating a new burden for people in a way that you don't expect? And I know the Recycling Commission's goal, and it sounds like Christina knows this better than I do, is to help give people the tools so that nobody needs more waste disposal than what would fit in the tote. So help people with composting, help people with recycling, so that everyone can make it work with that smaller space in the tote.
Yeah, I'll just throw in one other little thing on that. So the current limit is 3 32-gallon barrels. And honestly, Westford is at the high end. We put out a lot of trash per household. We're at like 1 ton per household per year, which is very high compared to the average across the state, whether you've got pay as you throw or not. So as much as it might seem like a burden to larger families, there are other towns and large families in those towns that have figured it out. We just haven't maybe pushed our residents to figure it out, or our residents just have not, they haven't had to do that. So it does seem daunting, but other towns and other families have figured it out and have done it.
Yeah, I should also mention I'm presenting this as sort of like a highly evolved idea. So this has not yet come before the select board, and this is sort of based on what we've seen so far from the vendors bidding. So just to let people know, this is not like a settled issue by any means, but it's sort of trending in a certain direction based on the way that waste collection disposal is now done. Automated, safer for the waste collection workers, more efficient, less costly for the town ultimately to have automated collection. So a lot of things are happening here all at once that are kind of trending us this way. Okay, so you'll be able to look at more specifically a whole bunch of stuff that we've just been talking about when we get it into the working draft form by next week. So lots more to see. And I think there weren't any other inputs from the budget challenges new revenue group, at least right now. Okay. So public forum, I think we'll just share the slides and sort of walk through and maybe talk a little bit about who should be presenting each one and what what we want to make sure we cover, any changes we want to make to the slides. I guess before we do, will everyone here on this call be able to be there either physically or virtually next Monday? Okay. How many people will be in the room physically? Just okay, great, that's plenty. Okay, good. Well, unless there's another idea, why don't I think we did good work last time deciding what we're trying to accomplish, which is let people ask the questions they would like to be answered by this committee. We're not in this meeting going to be putting forward any conclusions or findings because for a lot of good reasons, we're still making sure we're going through it in a clean way. I think we've done a good job of trying to set expectations that way. I think what I would propose just structurally would be that we go through our presentation first and allow questions as we go, and then have an open forum towards the end, just so we kind of set people on the course that we're on. The problem with doing open forum in the beginning is that it can kind of go all over the place. You may cover or help guide the discussion later if you present kind of what we're after at the outset. Okay, I also think it would be great if we had different voices speaking at different times. So I guess Valerie and I as co-chairs or chair and vice chair would probably open up and welcome people and maybe present the title slide. And then maybe as we go through the rest, if there are folks that feel comfortable from the subcommittee working groups to take on presenting individual slides and leading that part of the discussion, that would be great. So we would probably open up and then introduce the members and probably go through the charge also. Shanna, do you have a comment first?
Yeah, now that I know we talked about this deck, but now that I'm thinking more in my head, would it be helpful to have a slide about like reinforcing again the reason for the meeting at the beginning, just to reinforce that we're looking for feedback, we're looking for ideas, like we understand a lot of the previous challenges, we understand a lot of the reasons that we've all come to the room, right? And we understand that we're trying to get more money for the different areas, we're trying to get more money for the schools, and we're looking for less of regurgitating the old arguments and more about how can we do better? What are the suggestions to do better? What are the suggestions you have for more revenue? That was a lot of things that can't all fit in a slide, but I think just maybe it might be helpful to reiterate why we're there and what we're looking for. Because I think to your point, Tom, I'm a little worried that a lot of the attention at the microphone is we're upset about this, we're upset about that. And we get a lot of that, but what we're really trying to target is what do you not want to see cut? What services, what is important to you? And what are your suggestions to help us in the rest of this journey to provide the information you're looking for and to research the things that you're interested in? So.
Caught on mute. That's a great idea. So maybe let's take a section here and see. I have other suggestions too. I would love to ask the question on this slide. What are the questions that you would like answered in this report? Because I think there are a lot of like fact questions that people have that we may be already thinking of, but either in the body or an FAQ, I think will help people kind of ground to the same factual plane. I think we're looking for input specifically on the approach we're taking. And so if people have ideas in the different subsections as we go through, ideas for new revenue, ideas for additional, benchmarking, that'd be pretty helpful. I guess I do want to have people react to what, services are most valuable to them. I think that's sort of a complicated question to answer because it's sort of, but no, I mean, let's definitely entertain that. And I think we'll get a lot of that from the mic anyway. And I think we should also make it clear at the beginning that there will be an open forum at the end. So people know that they'll have a chance to talk.
Yeah, Tom, I was just gonna add that I think some of these, like the question framing, could be on sort of that public forum last slide. And then to Shayna's point, which I think is a great one, to set the expectation on one of the initial slides about what the meeting is, but not necessarily start the public forum, with all the questions. People will start seeing the questions and want to speak up, but this slide at the very beginning, you kind of want that to wait for the end. But those are great like prompts for, if the slides end and and people need something to think about.
That's a great idea. So make two slides here. One is the kind of upfront. Here's what we're going to be doing tonight. Here's the expectation for how to go through it. Here's what you can expect through the course of the night. And then it's sort of a tee up for the public comment section.
Yeah.
Give some prompt questions. Okay. Those are both great suggestions.
There's a word for that. Usually you go through is it like an agenda of the meeting or an outline of this is what I'm going to talk about, right? There's like that beginning slide.
Yeah, like agenda. Yeah. Okay, so Kristen and I can work on filling those out, but that's both great ads. Shannon?
Sorry, Warren. Do we have some guidelines, and maybe we can talk about this after we go through the deck again, I guess, and make assignments, but of, how we want to handle that public forum? Are we going to set time limits for people to talk? Can we, obviously you can't control the comments or we want people to have their voices heard, obviously, but to try to keep the conversation constructive, right? And that we really want to continue. We've set the expectations. We're going to talk to you about the things that we're focused on, but how we can kind of drive the conversation to try to keep it in the swim lanes we want it to stay in some capacity. Do we have maybe you guys have some general strategic things that you've done from, school committee and select board meetings, but I think maybe all of us kind of having an understanding of that too, of how we can all work together as an internal team, right? As the leaders of the meeting to try to figure out how we can keep it on task. And also that will allow the most voices to be heard, I think, as possible during the time frame.
We could ask one of the moderators, we could ask either Angela Harkness or Ellen Hardy to be an unbiased runner of the meeting, since it's a forum, it's a public forum. Yeah, that's something to consider. They have experience.
Sure. If they're available, I'm sure they'd be willing to help do that.
I think also, right, one of the most important things is to hear them, say that we've heard them, and that we're going to take their feedback, right? We're not here to answer all the questions. We're not here to solve all the problems. And I think the way that we respond is going to be important, right? So moderator or no moderator, but
Yeah, I'll think about that a little bit. I wonder if there's another one of us on the committee who might want to have that be their special section, kind of to step up and help do that, or, you know, I can do that if you'd like to. I mean, usually what'll happen is, you know, a lot of people will come up, some people will be very passionate. You know, when we have open forums on other topics, we really want to listen respectfully, want to give everyone who comes, you know, has invested the time to come, a chance to speak. We may gently begin to say, we've heard this comment a few times. If you've got something new to add or just want to add emphasis, please come up to the mic. But I think we've heard this argument. So if your argument is very similar, you know, we ask you to be brief. You know, it's usually a gentle nudge, and sometimes people will do that. Sometimes they won't. But I think the good point I think that Shannon made is we can also make it clear that we're not going to react to factual questions. Anything that people bring up as presented as a fact, for example, we're going to kind of reinterpret as a question that we'd like to respond to in the report. We're not going to try to respond to something someone says in the evening, you know, but we will make sure that whatever the question behind that is addressed. Because otherwise, if you've seen a lot of Westford public meetings, sometimes people get caught into like a back and forth with people at the mic, and that's usually not very helpful. So I think we have a strong bias against that, and just say, okay, we understand your point. There's a question behind it that we accept. We will be planning to come at this in the report and make sure we've got the data behind it to make a clear argument. Valerie?
I was just going to add that the Access to Town Meeting Committee, one of the outcomes of that was guidelines at the microphone for town meeting, open town meeting, and I could pull that up and we could use that for some of the wording that maybe could set some of the expectations on the public forum portion slide.
Good. Well, okay. I don't know if people feel why I'm a little bit reluctant. I almost feel like I wonder if there might be someone on the committee that would like to help do the open forum stuff, only because usually the reason you bring in the moderator is if something is super controversial and has gotten to the heated point where you want that kind of rules-based arbiter. And I wonder if my hope would be this meeting is kind of on the collaborative side of that. But I may be overreading into what the signaling is when you bring them in. That when in the past when we brought them in, it's because it's going to get messy.
I would agree that it feels like an escalation almost. So I think if we had a first meeting and it got a little bit too contentious or a little bit too far off the rails, and maybe that's something we could revisit for a future meeting. But I would tend to agree that I'm not sure that we want to set that like tone going into the meeting, because we really do want this to be collaborative and we want people to come with suggestions and thoughts and ideas. That's just my opinion.
Okay, well, why don't we walk through from here and see if there's a natural way that we, let me just do a time check. We're good. Okay. Why don't we just walk through and see? So now we're up through the reason for the meeting and the charge. Does it feel like, I guess, Valerie, maybe to you, does it feel like we're probably teeing up the first four? And then when we get to 5, well, I know you worked on this, but we could ask Dan if he wanted to present the way to give input, you know, after the meeting.
Yeah, sure. I'm flexible.
Okay. So maybe on the budget challenge piece, it would be somebody from that subcommittee. So the options are, I think it'd be good if Shanna presented the revenue source piece, and I will have already done enough talking. So it'd probably be, I guess maybe we'd ask Dan to do this. Does that make sense? And again, what we'd be doing is going through what the challenges are and sort of explaining them a little bit, but not going into a full detail of, basically the question here for the group is, are there other budget challenges or perceived, things that you've experienced in your lived experience in Westford that you'd like to be, included in this study? Christina?
Just a thought for the budget challenges side. I know we're not even close to giving a number, but do we want to give any sort, and this is discussion, do we want to give any sort of a rough order of magnitude? Just so that people understand, we're not talking about $500,000 here. So they understand that there are big challenges coming. And again, it's a question. I kind of go back and forth as to whether we want to even touch that now or not.
I would like to begin to bucket these at least and say, these are the ones that are going to have more than $1 million of impact, maybe. And then here's some that are in a smaller category.
Or even as a total of all of these. If you don't want to talk about individual ones, you could just say as a whole, these are looking in the X range. It's just a thought.
Other thoughts here, because I think we could sort of bucket them with ranges. I mean, these amongst all the things we're looking at are resolving pretty quickly to like a real number range because we have most of the inputs we need for this. Amy?
I think by bucketing them in big number ranges, that can help us adjust or help the public adjust their thinking on, okay, I can see a fee for that service. I can see a fee for that service because of that drastic amount of increase. I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Shanna?
I was going to say similar. I think if we have something broad, like this is $1 million plus, $1 million less, and we're comfortable with it by Monday, then that's great. But I think if we're not quite there yet, I think Christina's second suggestion of at least saying, we expect this to be approximately $5 to $7 million, or something that's a high level bucket. But I think giving some sort of dollar amount could be important as we start to talk about this more, because I think people need to really understand, and I don't even think us as a group yet really understand what we're looking for. But if we are talking about numbers that are in the multiple $1 billion like that, that needs to change the narrative, right? Because we're not going to find that money with the revenue sources that Tom and I have been researching, right? So something else is going to have to give there. So I do think that having some hierarchical number, whether or not we're at a place where Dan feels comfortable bucketing them, would be important.
Okay, why don't I take a note for this when I talk to Dan on Monday? We'll try to find, based on what he's got so far, a way that doesn't nail us to anything, that we'll have some consciousness of what error bands are still around the number based on the data we have so far. And we'll try to make sure we basically communicate that, look, we're just to your point, this is not like normal budget year problems. We always, every year it's challenging to balance the budget, but that's not like, if in a normal year we've got this much new revenue to access, we're talking about 3 or 4 times that. I mean, we're talking about a big difference here. Okay, good. Why don't we look at the next slide? Okay, does this seem okay? No, this is the benchmark group. Okay.
Is that research method, or isn't that actually the outline of the report? That the title seems.
Yeah. I wonder if this goes before.
Yeah, I think this is the report outline.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we would come at this first. And then talk about the different building blocks.
I could actually see report line sort of wrapping up, right? Because we're sort of talking about, here's the things we're looking at, and then it's a preview of what our work product would be. I don't know.
Does that make sense? If people like that better, I think it could go there too.
Especially because I
seeing-
want people to see that last, so that that's sort of one of the things we're asking for their input on, right?
Okay, good. I'm seeing some nods. So why don't we put that last, I guess, after the principal 4 areas that we're looking at for research. So
But
we've
to your-
done the budget challenge piece. The new revenue piece, I guess, would be next. And that, I didn't mean to cut somebody off. Someone.
I was just gonna say, to your point, because when it first came up, I think you thought it was the benchmarking group. And I'm saying this without knowing what would go on the slide, but I guess there's not really, I'm seeing a slide that speaks to the work happening in our group yet.
Yeah, so maybe we need to add some slides. I'm thinking that we'd have one for each sort of the topics. So there's budget challenge, new revenue. There's the benchmarking piece. What's the analysis that we're doing? And then there's the efficiency search. So I was thinking we'd have one for each of those main topics, just sharing a little bit of the outline of what we're doing and how we're doing it so far. So I guess before we let it go, so Shannon, are you comfortable with the new revenue stuff? And I think it's laying out what they are in the description.
Yeah, how in depth do we want? Because we could talk 15 minutes just giving a description. Should I just maybe pinpoint ones that might be harder to understand? Because I mean, I feel like town school facility rentals, that's pretty. So maybe just talking about like what a real estate transfer fee, like just a few that are a little bit less obvious. And then if people have more questions later, I just don't want to take up too much time going through each one.
Yeah, the total time for this thing is 90 minutes. Kristen, do you know?
I think we have to be out by 9 o'clock. So yeah, I'd say hour and 45.
Okay. So if we want to have plenty of time for discussion, I think Shannon, we're getting a little feedback. So I think we'd want to get through this presentation part in probably, I don't know, 45 minutes. So if there are 10 slides, it might be 5, 6, 7 minutes on a slide. So I think you're right. I think you're more going to be saying, basically, we went out and canvassed many communities who've done studies like this. We also got input from others. We look forward to getting input from you tonight. But we're investigating new revenue opportunities across a very broad range of things that include these. Yeah, and I think you might have time to pick the 5 or 6 or 7 that are less obvious, and maybe just explain what they are, because people might not know.
Sounds good.
Erica?
Just one comical thing. It says new revenue opportunities and it says cannabis. I mean, like we're going to be sitting. I think we might want to say cannabis licensing or just.
I just saw the same thing. I put cannabis excise because it would be taxed from that. So I saw that as well.
Okay.
As opposed to the town selling cannabis.
Right.
New town hall function.
So this is a nuance as well. Obviously, Proposition 2.5 override to me reads as the last thing, because I read left side top to bottom, right side top to bottom. I don't know if that was done for a reason in that location, if it matters at all. That's obviously like the largest ask that would most likely be done. So I don't know if your group had talked about that in terms of an order, or this is no particular order or anything like that.
I think Dan just put it in here, but I think it's a good idea. I think what it signals is we want to thoughtfully, before we're going to go ask Westford, to open their wallets and give more money to the town, we're really going to explore every other good idea that's out there. So I think it does sort of belong last resort.
I just want to add to that. I think you're right that it's nuanced, because when this is not a group that's focused on that as its primary source, right? And I think people are sort of wrongly assuming that that's the inevitable outcome, and reiterating that we are doing all this due diligence, and that might still be an outcome, but that we're not just rushing to get to that, I guess. But we're also not hiding from it either, because there was again, a feedback form that made me realize we can't just not say it. It is available as a tool also.
Right. Right, and it's, I mean, the way I would explain it to someone who asked me at Market Basket would be, right now we want to remain open, looking at both what we think the costs are and what the new revenue sources are. And we're just making recommendations about where we think the potential lies for helping to close the budget gap with all these various options. So it'll be a second phase and more of a policy decision about exactly what paths the town takes. That's not really within our remit. Okay, good. So Shannon will take this. I guess for the benchmarking crew and the efficiency crew, how would you like to break that up? And are there people who are logical folks to take those on? I think here we're talking about our methodology and the questions we're trying to answer, not, certainly no outcomes, but just maybe here's the benchmark groups we're looking at. Here's who we've selected, preliminarily as our market baskets.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe we can hash out some wording, through and send suggestions or something for wording outside of this meeting instead of wordsmithing. But yeah, that makes sense to me for benchmarking.
I think
To
why
talk about.
we chose the communities is important, where we got those communities from, not just.
Yep.
Okay, so that good suggestion, Valerie. So I guess maybe that subcommittee wants to put their heads together and figure out who wants to lead on each of these slides and propose kind of what we get covered on each. And I mean, I think the input we'd be interested in here would be, I mean, what's the things that are hardest to change later? The benchmark group is pretty difficult to change once you've started. It's a huge amount of work to change it anyway. I think describing the kinds of, you may already have a bunch of questions at this point about the kinds of questions people want answered. People will ask questions about how other towns allocate between school and municipal functions. Those are great questions we certainly intend to answer. Okay, any group input for what you think the subcommittee should be thinking about for the benchmarking slide? And then we'll pause and ask the same question for the efficiency slide. Okay, anything for the efficiency slide? Anything you'd want the presenter to be thinking about based on where you think the audience will be? I think there's good, explanation of what we're doing and what we're looking for. And again, we can, any question that gets sort of into a fact situation, we can sort of turn back into a question. So for example, if people said, what has the town done historically or something like that, we could say we certainly want to include that in the report. There'll be a section about steps we've taken recently.
I think we should also mention that we're talking to the town departments to, have their inputs on efficiencies and boards. I think we should also mention the things we started off with, discussing both, if there's anything we can learn from the prior effort that was done in 2004, if we can maybe consolidate school and town functions in any way. And maybe do any sort of regionalization. Those are all things that can be included under this chart, I think.
Yeah, no, those are all great points. Okay, so it sounds like that subcommittee will take those on. Let's see, I'm trying to think of when we'd want this draft. So if Monday we're presenting, ideally all we would actually be doing on Monday would be meeting with Dan, because they'll just be coming back to identify how we want to bucket and put numbers on the budget challenge slide. So I don't know if we could ask you guys to be by the end of the day Friday, maybe, to have suggested slides for this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, once we finish the slides, that I think either Sunday night or Monday morning, if we think that these are in a good enough spot to post on our website ahead of time, and maybe even consider having a couple handouts. Because I know that like the people process information differently, right? And sitting through a slides, for me, I really prefer, I learned at the last strategic retreat, I noticed that I absorbed the information much better when for the presentation that I had a handout for.
I think Monday. So why don't we plan to put a finished version, not finished version, why don't we plan to post a draft? Could we try to do it by Friday, end of day? And what that would mean is that we would not have the bucketing. We'd have to do that and then update that. But I think that's all we can do. So
Yeah, we can definitely put that up. And I think with anything, presentations can slightly change, and we can always have a revised sheet if we need to, or a revised handout at the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Okay.
think that's fine for suggesting wording on here. I just didn't want to pause the whole meeting while we, put text on a slide, I guess.
no, you kind of read my mind, Valerie. I'm a big fan of not trying to edit wording in a group. So, Erica, you're on me. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. Just a suggestion. I can see on the chart outline, if we want to have an extra chart that just shows a graphic on how our approach, it says, this benchmarking effort is outputting these sorts of things, and these are the, all these outputs are going into, establishing what our budget gap is likely to be, and we're going to use that to create scenario. I mean, just a graphic. I'm happy to, try to construct something and send it out, but I wonder if that would be helpful, just so people can kind of get the big picture of how all this comes together with, report and presentations coming out at the far end.
Yeah, if you could do that, Erica, that would be terrific. And also, you've brought up sort of the timeline before. This may be the same thing, but maybe one slide or two slides, but something that gives the overarching timeline that, I guess, our remit basically is October 1st, but it'll certainly inform the budget choices that we are then voting on together in town meeting. So a little bit of an arc that goes out to town meeting, and then maybe a graphic on how we're collecting and then disseminating. And that's okay, great. So we have part of that here in text form. So maybe between what Eric is creating and what's here, we can give people a full sense of how this is going to roll out. Other opportunities they'll have to give input. Okay, so let's see. Do we have the outline? I'm sorry, I'm jumping back one, but so we will have gone through the four kind of subcommittee bullets. We'll have talked a little bit about the report. Who would like to address kind of how the report is intended to come together, kind of what, to sort of expand on the outline?
I'm happy to do that since I came up with the outline. I can explain some of the thinking.
That'd be great. That'd be great. So Erica, if you could do that. And I guess that'll lead into also this graphic, the sort of timeline / sort of process flow graphic. So maybe if you could own all of that piece, that would be great, Erica. And then we had another slide, which was sort of the intro to the open forum, kind of ending with the intro to the open forum. I think whoever's honchoing this slide, I think we're open to any feedback and anything they've seen so far, if they have any comments or questions. And then sort of we want to use the available time to get additional inputs on. I guess in this section, we said, if there's any feedback you want to give on the services that are most important to you. Because in the end, part of this will also be what are our values? How does our budget represent our values? And so it's good to have a window where people can express kind of the identity of the town and the sort of vision of the town they have, to make sure whatever recommendations we make are sort of more of a policy issue that'll come to the budgeting authorities, but there could be space for it here. Does anyone feel drawn to sort of handling this part to kind of, I mean, I'll be there absolutely, and Valerie will be there too, to if things get weird. But at least as a starting point, if there's someone who wants to kind of lead that sort of open form discussion.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Yeah, Erica, if you're comfortable taking that run of things, then let's do that. We should do kind of a close up and thank you, and this is what we've heard, kind of wrap up, but maybe we can do that without a slot. Well, that's perfect. We'll land on that. Okay, I think we know who's doing what. And I think if we could set I don't know what works for you, Kristen, if we want to do a midday Friday to have the draft that we plan to post. Is that okay? I know that's kind of short notice actually, but.
No, that's fine. I actually, I'm looking at my calendar, so we need to post the meeting by tomorrow. So I'll work with Jeremy on that. And then I have like posting it to the website by 2:30 on Friday. We're also going to be posting the select board agenda. So it will be a little bit of a hectic afternoon, but if I could get any comments by noon on Friday, and then if there's any substantial changes, certainly send them to me over the weekend and I can touch base with Tom and Dan Monday morning.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. I know that's a lot to ask, but I think that's sort of what the timeline requires. Shanna?
Do we know, or do we have a designated person that's writing, taking down all the information? Do I need to take some notes as my official clerk role? I just want to make sure that as we have people coming up with their suggestions, that we know who is being responsible for actually, we may all take our own individual notes, obviously, but more legitimate notes.
So we'll have it taped, right? WCAT. So we can always have Jeremy go back and do the official minutes. But if someone wants to take notes during the forum, that would be appreciated.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, super. Was that Amy? Okay, thanks, Amy.
And I think I think with Shayna's point, but the idea of being able to, or Kristen, that that we heard them, right? So having maybe some of Amy's notes, being able to express to them, this is the things we heard, right then and there, I think might be a positive thing.
Yeah, great. So Amy, while you're taking, maybe if we ask you to recap what you've heard, maybe you could just share some of what you heard at the end of the meeting live.
Absolutely.
Just more logistics questions. I'm glad, Kristen, you're already thinking ahead, like making sure WestfordCAT knows to be there. So they're set up, and whatever AV coordination we need, we're in good shape for.
Yeah, so Valerie, Dan, and myself are going to be meeting over at Millennium at 2 p.m. on Monday to make sure the setup's all good related to AV and rooms. If anybody wants to pop over at 2 o'clock on Monday, they're more than welcome. I understand that's kind of in the middle of people's day, so don't worry about it if it doesn't work. And we'll be bringing over, kind of markers and poster sheets and things like that if it's needed, a sign-in sheet, agendas, extra presentations if people want to take a copy of that with them. So that's kind of all in the outline that we had been going over in the past few weeks related to the logistics of the presentation.
Okay.
Yep.
What
And
time
I've been checking with the school staff to just make sure who is in the building that day. There's a couple vacations happening. So I think we're all covered there, just in case. I've set it up before, the setup before for a school committee meeting, but just feels like a little bit more pressure for this. So I just want to make sure that we have supports if needed. And I've connected with those people. So.
Great. Echoing what Shannon just put in the comments. Thanks for people who are making sure the logistics of this are actually planned out. So well done. We have a couple more things on the agenda. Do people feel pretty good about the state we're in for the presentation? I feel like we're in good shape.
Just a question, what time are doors open? What time should we all be there?
I would think we should be there no later than 6:45. It starts at 7. I know a lot of older population gets places very early to have a seat or to get a parking spot. So I would say probably no later than 6:45 if possible. I'll probably be there much earlier.
The building should be open if that's the other question you're asking.
I'll be there about 6:45. I've learned the hazards of getting there too early. Okay, a couple of things I wanted to cover. One of them we've covered already, which was how do we migrate to a draft that we can begin to edit. So I think we've got that. By next week, we'll have picked a format and some protocol and make sure everyone is notified in advance where they can find the working draft and begin to add to it. The other is discussion about departmental and municipal interviews. That's still on our list for today. I guess, Kristen, is there any other inputs you need from the group as you proceed on that?
No, so I think, thank you and Shayna for providing your questions. Again, as kind of stated very quickly in our subcommittee update, Christina has emailed all of the departments that we feel like we need to talk to, and we're going to be in the process of setting up those meetings. And then we'll be in the process of going out to the other municipalities with questions, I think, shortly thereafter. We want to make sure we understand our departments inside and out before we go on the outside to ask questions. But I think we should be able to have that wrapped up by middle to end of August.
Okay, great. Any feedback or questions related to the interviews? Okay. I think we're in pretty good shape. Does anyone else have anything they want to check in on before we maybe break a couple minutes early?
I was just gonna say, we don't have another task on our side, Tom. Most of my revenue stuff is put together. So if there's anything that I can help with from the budget and efficiency side, and anyone has a task they want me to sit in on, or if there's anything I can help with any of the meetings, I'm happy to take on a little, not too much, but to take some things off some of your plates too, because I think like Val was saying, you know, we're combing through the data was taking a bit, and now you're at that task. And I think I've got a few things to tweak on my things as the information comes through, but I feel like I wrote up the majority. You know, I think my stuff's like 90% done. And if there's not something else that we need to initiate on our side, I'm happy to help if somebody has something that they're comfortable or that it makes sense to outsource. So just wanted to offer.
That's a great offer. And you'll see when you take a look, but Shanna's done a prodigious amount of work. So yeah, a lot of work that required a lot of interviews and a lot of fact finding. So you'll enjoy digging into that. Valerie?
To Shayna's point, Kristen or Tom, can you just remind me how the open meeting law works? Like say Shayna and I got together, but we're from different subcommittees, but we're in the bit large. Could someone just clarify that for?
Yeah,
my
so two
standards?
people, one, I could talk to you, Valerie, about something, or you could talk to someone else, as long as it's not a quorum. So we can cross pollinate as well, just as long as it's kind of one-to-one conversations.
And again, we'll put forward some protocol that keeps us on the right side of open meeting with regards to the document. I think what we're concerned about is if you've ever worked on like a Google Doc that a lot of people are on, it kind of turns into a discussion in the comment thread. So we just want to make sure we're not, you know, backing into a place we don't want to be by accident. So we'll give some guidance on that. Okay, well, great. I think we're in good shape. So we will, I guess Kristen will touch base and make sure we're final on the draft presentation deck on Friday. I'll connect with Dan to create sort of an update with the bucketing we talked about on Monday. And we'll also work to make sure that the document is put together in some sort of next step form for next week.
Yep, and then we'll meet as a group. Oh, you were getting to that, sorry.
No, just barely. So are we still good with this time? Everyone good with the time still? We can stick with this timing? Okay. I guess we'll leave it to the subcommittees whether they want to get together. I don't think our subcommittee would probably get together again separately, given that we're kind of in the final stages, I think. But why don't we plan to get together full group? I'm sure we're going to want to reflect on what happened on Monday. So let's plan to all be together for the whole meeting, and we can, if there's reason to change, let me know. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. think we're making a lot of progress. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Second, all in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Okay, we're good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.